Hi, boys and girls. It's time to wrap up the book Indian in the Cupboard. I'll start with chapter 15. Chapter 15. Wait, though, before I get started, I hear that there's a couple of families that have been really enjoying the book, so I wanted to give a special thank you to those families. First of all, Emma Hartman. Sure have missed you at school, and I'm glad you've been enjoying the book. And also the Bischoff family. I'm glad to know that you've been enjoying the book as well. Hope to see your word count jump up after you take your AR test. To all the other kiddos that have enjoyed it, thanks for coming alongside of me on this adventure. And today is a huge adventure. It's called Underfloor Adventure. Omri and Patrick decided they must take turns sitting up all night with Boone. As you recall in chapter 14, he got injured. Not just any injury. He took an arrow to the chest. I know, we can put it behind the dressing up crate. Then the light won't show through my door for my parents to see. They got into their pajamas, and Patrick was supposed to be sleeping on a foldaway bed, so they got that bed ready so that their parents wouldn't be suspicious when they came in to say goodnight. When Omri's mom came in to give him a kiss, they were both in bed, apparently reading. The fact that Omri was reading in semi-darkness was nothing unusual. She was always at him about it. "Oh, Omri, why won't you switch on your bedside light? You're going to ruin your eyes." "It doesn't work," said Omri promptly. "Yes, it does. Dad fixed it this morning. Do you know what was wrong with it?" "What?" said Omri impatiently, wishing for once that she would just go away. "That wretched rat of Gillen's made a nest under the floorboard. They lined it with bits of insulation and gnawed off wire from your lamp." "No wonder. I'm glad it didn't electrocute itself." Omri sat up sharply. "Do you mean the rat's loose?" His mother gave him a lopsided smile. "Where have you been keeping yourself? Yeah, the rat has been loose since last night. Haven't you noticed Gillen frantically looking about the house for it? It seems to have taken up residence under your bed." "Under my bed!" Omri yelled. "Oh no!" "It's no use looking for it," his mother said as Omri leaped out of bed and dropped to his knees. "I mean, right under the floor. Daddy caught a glimpse of it today when he had the boards up, but he couldn't catch it under the floor. It's a matter of waiting until it comes out for food, and then—" But Omri wasn't listening. "A rat loose? Oh no." "What are you, scared of it?" "Me scared of the stupid rat? Of course not. But we've got to catch it," said Omri desperately. He felt wild and furious. How could Gillen have let something like this happen? The perils that a rat presented to his little men simply turned his blood cold. And why of all the rooms in the house had the rat chosen his room to build a nest under? He was tearing frantically at the edge of the carpet, trying to pull it back when his mother hiked him up to his feet. "Omri, the carpet and those floorboards have been taken up once already today. They put everything back and everything's tidied up. Rat or no rat, I'm not going to be able to sleep through you looking for this rat. Now get into bed and go to sleep." "But," said Omri. "Into bed now," said his mother. When she used that tone, there was no arguing with her. Omri went into bed, got his kiss, and watched the light go off and the door close. As soon as the footsteps had faded away, he looked up at Patrick. "Now we must definitely stay awake all night. We mustn't close our eyes for a moment," said Omri. He was hunting through his ancient collection of book matches for one of which his father had not cut the matches out. You see, people used to collect those little books of matches. At last he found one and he lit the candle. They very gently moved Boone's bed out of hiding onto the bedside table. They set the candle beside it, and one by one, they moved over to each side of him and watched his ill-looking face. The pink square of Band-Aid moved fractionally up and down as he breathed. You could hardly see it. It was like watching the long hand of a clock moving. Only the strongest concentration enabled them to detect faint motion. "Hadn't we better move the seed box up here too?" whispered Patrick. And in the moment Little Bear had shot Boone, Omri had almost been angry enough to have fed him to the rat. But now his fury had cooled, and he certainly didn't want anything awful to happen to him. Between the two of them, they cleared a place on the table and lifted the seed box with the longhouse, the fireplace, the hitching posts, all of it, out of the reach of the prowling rodent. "Careful, don't frighten the horse." The horses, however, were getting used to being carried about, and they hardly looked up from munching their little piles of grass. There was no sign of life from the longhouse. There followed a timeless period of just sitting there silently, their eyes fixed on Boone's still figure in the flickering candlelight. Omri began to feel lightheaded after a bit. The candle flame went fuzzy, and Boone's body seemed to vibrate as he stared at it. At the very back of his mind, something else was nagging. He didn't ask himself what this was, because he had a superstitious feeling that if he let his mind wander from Boone even for a moment, that Boone would slip away into death. He felt as if it was only his will and Patrick's will that kept that fragile, tiny heart beating. Suddenly, though, a thought, like a landscape lit up by lightning, it flashed to the forefront of Omri's brain, and he sat up with his eyes wide open and his breath held. Patrick! What? The key! I know where the key is! Where? Where's that key? Right under my feet! It must have dropped through the floorboards when Dad opened them. There's nowhere else it could be. How are we going to get it? Said Patrick. We'll have to take up the carpet first. Maybe Dad didn't nail all the boards down. Moving very quietly, they managed to lift one corner of Omri's bed and kick back the edge of the carpet from underneath. Another bit was under the bedside table leg. Now that part was kind of tricky. But they shifted between them in the end. Carefully, they folded the corner of carpet back on itself, exposing the boards. Omri then stuck his fingers down the narrow crack at the end of the boards one after another, testing to see if they could be lifted. Only one of them could. The rest were nailed down to the joists underneath. Making as little noise as possible, he hadn't heard his parents go to bed yet. Omri pried up the short end of the board, about 6, maybe 18 inches, and gapped in the light of the candle he was holding. Even with the candle, though, he couldn't see much. He couldn't find it. We'll have to turn on that bedside light, Omri said. They switched it on, and they carried it over with its cord down to the hole. Kneeling onto the floor, they peered into the depths. All they could make out, though, was the dusty lath and plaster about a foot down. Now that's the ceiling of the living room. Oh, that makes me nervous. It's the top side of the ceiling of the living room, the room Omri's parents were now sitting in. We'll have to be dead quiet, or they're going to hear us. Dead quiet doing what? It's not there. You'd see it if it was. It must be under one of those boards that's nailed down, said Omri. At that moment, they heard Little Bear calling them, and they both stood up. He was standing outside the longhouse, naked except for his breechcloth, which is like underwear. His hair hung loose, and his face and chest and arms were smeared with ashes, and his feet were bare. Little Bear, what are you doing? Said Omri. Want fire, make dance, call spirits, make Boone live. Omri looked at him for a moment and felt an ache in his throat that reminded him painfully of his babyish days, when he used to cry all the time. Days he thought he had left behind forever. Little Bear, dancing won't do any good. The spirits won't help. We need a doctor. To get the doctor, we need the key. Would you help it? Would you help us find it? I help, Little Bear said. Gently, Omri picked him up. He knelt on the floor and put his hand down in the hole. Patrick held the light, and Omri opened his hand, and Little Bear stood on it. Wow, so he's standing on the ceiling of the living room, in the floorboards. I think it's somewhere down there, Omri said quietly. On the other side of that wooden wall, you have to find a way through. Find a hole or a crack or something. We'll give you all the light we can, but it's bound to be awfully dark in there. Do you think you can do it? I go, said Little Bear immediately. Right, start looking for a way through. Little Bear, a tiny, vulnerable figure, strode off through the dust into the darkness under the floor. Oh, boys and girls, isn't there a rat under there? Oh, no. Is there a way through? He whispered down to the tunnel. Yes, came Little Bear's voice. Big hole. I go through. Omri, give light. Omri pushed the light down as far as he could, but the base of the lamp made it stick. Can you see anything down there? He whispered. There was no answer. He and Patrick knelt there for an age. There was no sound. And then Patrick said suddenly, did he take his bow and arrow? No, why? Said Omri. What if he meets the rat down there, Omri? Oh no, Omri had completely forgotten about the rat. Now he felt a strange jerk in his chest, as if he had a hiccup. It was painful. He bent his head till his face was in the hole. He could smell the dust. The bright bulb was between him and the place where Little Bear had gone through, presumably. But what could have made a hole like that in the joist anyways? The only thing he could think of was a rat. A rat who was probably on a nightly prowl for food. A pink-eyed, needle-toothed, omnivorous giant rat. Little Bear, come back! Come back! Omri called frantically into the blankness, but still trying to be quiet so he didn't wake up his parents. Little Bear! Omri, what are you doing up there? Said somebody from downstairs. Darn, busted. I can hear that blasted rat pattering about overhead. It's probably keeping the boys awake. I better go up, said his mother. Even this dire prospect hardly had power to do more than push Omri's desperation one stage further. He probably wouldn't have moved from one place if Patrick hadn't acted swiftly. Quick, light off, into bed. He pulled Omri up, snatched the lamp out of his hand, and switched it off. The candle was still down in the hall. Oh my goodness. I hope they don't catch the house on fire. Patrick shoved the floorboard roughly back into position and moved the carpet so that it more or less covered the boards if you didn't look closely. Then he pushed Omri into his bed, covered him up. The footsteps were nearly at the door, and had just flung himself down on the folding bed when the door opened. Omri lay there with his eyes squeezed shut, thinking, "Don't put the light on! Don't put the light on!" Light was coming into the room from the landing, but not enough to see anything much. His mother stood there for what seemed 100 years. Finally she whispered, "Are you boys asleep?" Needless to say, she got no reply. The boys knew how to play quiet. "Omri?" Then after another 100 years, during which Omri imagined Little Bear being bitten in half by that rat underneath the floor, she left. Wait, breathed Patrick. He knew that they should wait until the mother went down the stairs again. It was torture to wait. The rat had stopped moving when all the scuffling and footsteps had started. That was something, but now it was quiet again. Omri imagined it creeping toward its prey, its pink nose twitching, its albino whiskers trembling hungrily. Oh, how could he have let Little Bear go down there? Boone's death would at least not have been his fault, but if Little Bear was killed, that was certainly his fault. Omri knew he would never forgive himself. At long last, the living room door closed, and both boys stole out of bed again. Patrick reached the light first. Omri grabbed it, but Patrick insisted on looking first to see if Boone was still breathing. He was. They rolled back the carpet and lifted it again. They were terrified that every movement they made would make the grown-ups below aware of what was happening. The homemade candle was burning away in the gloom like a little torch in a disused mine, throwing its eerie light down the tunnel. Omri lay down flat. He didn't dare raise his voice, but he called softly, "Little Bear, are you there? Little Bear, are you there? Come back. You're in terrible danger." Silence. No noise. "Why doesn't he come?" Omri whispered, frenzied. At that moment they did hear something, though. It was hard to identify. It was the rat, all right. What was it doing? There was no running sound, just a sort of tiny shock, as if it had made one short, sudden movement, maybe a pounce. Omri's heart was in his mouth. Then there were other sounds. If he had not gotten used to straining his ears to catch the voices of little men, he might not have heard it, but he did hear it, and hope nearly lifted him off the ground. It was a faint, light scrambling sound, the sound of a small body getting through a hole in a hurry. Omri pulled the lamp back to the hole and thrust his arm in instead, his hand open, and almost at once he felt Little Bear run into it. Omri closed his fingers just as something, oh my gosh, gross, warm and fuzzy, brushed against the back of his hand. He snatched his arm out, grazed his knuckles on the splintery wood. Oh, there was something else in his hand, something cold and knobbly, twice as heavy as Little Bear. He opened his fingers, and both boys leaned over to look. Oh, wow. Sorry, that's a little blurry, boys and girls, but you can see Little Bear has the key in his hand. Oh, you've done it, Little Bear. Good for you. Now, quick. Patrick got the candle up and put the floorboard back. I'll go find the Red Cross man. So that was the gentleman that had been in the war earlier that helped Little Bear's leg, remember? Reckless now, they switched the top light on. Patrick, being as quiet as he could, replaced the floorboard and the carpet, while Omri looked through the fingers jumbled up in the biscuit tin. Luckily, the Army medical orderly was right on top, still holding his little precious doctor's bag. Little Bear, meanwhile, stood beside the pallet bed on which Boone was lying, staring down at him, still clutching the key in his arm. Omri took it from him, thrust the plastic man in the cupboard, and turned the key. He made himself count to 10 while Patrick watched, pop-eyed and scarcely breathing. Then he opened the door, and there stood Tommy, his bag at his feet, rubbing his eyes and frowning around him. "Well, if it ain't you again. I don't half pick my moments to drop off to sleep, I must say. Thunder and great Minnie winning overhead. I thought it was a goner." "What's a Minnie?" asked Patrick in a croaky voice. "What? Another of you? Another big person? I must have eaten too much cheese for dinner. Oh, shouldn't give us cheese for when there's a big attack. It's hard on the stomach. What's a mini? Well, a mini is a Minderwerfer. That's one of them big German shells. They make a horrible row, they do. Then they land with a sort of whistle, and it gets louder and louder, and then kabam! They blow up everything. Them blokes with my job have to pick themselves up and run quick to see where it fell, and then we look in the trench and take care of the wounded people. We've got a wounded man here we need you to take care of, said Omri. Oh yeah? That old redskin again, is it? No, it's another one. Could you step onto my hand? Omri lifted him to where Boone lay, and Tommy at once knelt beside him and began a professional examination. Oh, he's in a bad way. I'll have to say, with his bandage off, I might be able to help him. Let me take a look at his wound. He was cutting it off with a minute pair of scissors as he spoke. And as the bandage opened, the anxious watchers saw the tuft of tissue was now red with blood. The bleeding stopped, but what was it in there? Was it a bullet? An arrow, said Omri. Well, I'm not much with arrow wounds, but the head's not still in there, is it, I hope? No, we pulled it out. Good. Lucky it missed his heart. Well, let me see what I can do. He got the hypodermic out of his bag and fiddled with it for a moment. Then he plunged the needle into Boone's chest. After that, he stitched up the wound, put a field dressing on it, and got Little Bear to help him peel off the rest of the old blood-stained Band-Aid. You a pal of his? He said to the Indian. Little Bear stared at him, but he did not deny it. Well, then look here. When he wakes up, you keep giving him these here pills. They're iron. They'll build him up. And this is for the pain. We'll have to hope that there's no infection. We need some penicillin for him, said Patrick. Tommy looked at him blankly. What's penicillin? Omri nudged Patrick. You know they never discovered penicillin, which is like an antibiotic. They hadn't discovered it in his time. Best thing I can suggest is a drop of brandy, said Tommy. And he took out a flask and poured some down Boone's throat. Look there, his color's changing already. He'll open his eyes soon. I wouldn't wonder. Keep him warm, that's the ticket. Now I must be getting back. I must wake up. Even if there's a mini that's landed, I'll be in demand, no mistake. Omri carried him back to the cupboard. Tommy, what if the mini had fallen on you? Couldn't have done it, could it? It would have been this here dream. I'd be singing with a heavenly choir. There's no way it fell on me. I wouldn't be here. Hurry up and shut that door. I think I can hear him calling, Stretcher! Omri smiled gratefully at Tommy. He hated to send him back, but obviously Tommy knew he needed to go help. Goodbye, Tommy. Thanks and good luck. He shut the door. From the other end, Little Bear screamed, Omri, come! Boone, open eyes! Boone, wake up! Omri and Patrick turned. Sure enough, there was Boone, staring up into Little Bear's face. What happened? Nobody liked to tell him, but at last Little Bear had to confess. I shoot. What you talking about, you crazy Injun? I asked you what happened in the picture. Did them settlers beat the Redskins, or what happened? Or did the Redskins carry... Okay. What you talking about, you crazy Injun? I asked you what happened in the picture. Did them settlers beat the Redskins? Or get to where they was aiming to get to? Or did the Redskins carry off the women and scalp them all? They dirty, low-down savages. Little Bear drew in his breath. His head, which had been hanging in shame, came up sharply, and to Omri's horror, he actually saw his hand go to his knife again. Luckily, he had no knife, but he jumped to his feet. Boone, shut your mouth! Don't insult the Indian braves, or Little Bear will shoot you again. This time good, and I'll take your scalp and I'll hang it on a pole. Boone's scalp, too dirty though. Hang on, belt of Indian chief. And he snatched the chief's cloak off Boone's body, swirled it around proudly, and took it back. Wow, so Tommy really made Boone feel better. Omri was shocked, but Patrick was laughing so hard he could scarcely hold it in. But he controlled himself enough to wrap Boone up in the cutout blanket to keep him warm. Omri snatched Little Bear up between finger and thumb. Oh, so you're a chief again, are you? He hissed furiously. Chiefs ought to know how to keep their tempers. Here. He picked up the broken headdress off the floor and fitted it lopsidedly onto Little Bear's head. Now, Chief, have a good look at yourself. And he held Little Bear up to a mirror. Little Bear just took one look, and then he hid his face. Just you remember what you did to your friend. Not friend, enemy, said Little Bear. But the anger had kind of gone out of him. Whatever he is, you did a good job on him. And we can't even see what you did to him, so it's up to you to help make sure he's better. We can't see the medicine. When Boone is better, do you know what you're going to do? You're going to make him your blood brother. Blood brother? Yes, both make little cuts, and then you shake hands, and the blood mingles. It's an old Indian custom. Little Bear looked baffled. That's not Indian custom. Sure it is. I saw it on a TV show once. That's a white man idea, not Indian idea. Well, couldn't you do it just this once? Little Bear was silent for a moment. Then Omri saw that crafty look that he knew of old coming into the Indian's face. Good. Little Bear give Boone medicine, make him my brother when strong. Omri put plastic in box, make real life for Little Bear. Not tonight, said Omri finally. We've had enough excitement for one evening. Tonight you need to stand guard over Boone, give him his pills when he needs them, drink lots of water, and him too. Tomorrow, if everything's all right, I'll bring your woman to life. That's a promise. That was a fun chapter. Chapter 16 is the end of the book. It's called Brothers. Here it is. Brothers. Omri had finally intended to go to sleep. Patrick did, almost immediately, but Omri couldn't. Tired he was, just couldn't sleep. Instead, he lay there in the candlelight, his head turned toward the table where Boone lay, and Little Bear sat cross-legged next to him, watching. Sometimes Omri would close his eyes, but he would only daze off. Each time he opened them, Little Bear was standing there staring. It was partly the rat that kept Omri awake. It pattered around the floor for hours, making Omri very nervous, but it never came anywhere near the men. Something else was on Omri's mind, though. He would bring Little Bear's woman to life as he had promised, but then what? I mean, it had been hard enough with only one little being to feed, protect, and keep secret. Much harder after Boone came, and now there'd be a woman, too? And would that mean there'd be children someday? For all of Little Bear's unpredictable moods, his demands, his occasional cruelties, Omri did like him, and he wanted to keep him, but he knew now that that was impossible. Whichever way he thought about it, the end was always the same, disaster of some kind. Whatever magic had brought this strange adventure about must be put to use again to send the little people all back to the place and time they belonged. Having decided this, however sadly and reluctantly, Omri's stressful thoughts let go their hold on him. He drifted off to sleep, and when he opened his eyes again, dawn was breaking and there was the morning chorus of birds just beginning. The candle had burned out and the rat had gone to sleep. So had Little Bear, nodding over his bow. The yellow field dressing on Boone moved steadily up and down with a stronger heartbeat, and his skin had lost that gray look. He was better. Of course, Little Bear shouldn't have gone to sleep, but just the same, he had done his best. Omri slipped out of bed. His blazer was hanging from a hook at the back of his door. He took the paper bag with the woman in it out of the pocket. Moving on tiptoe, he went to the cupboard, took out the plastic soldier, put in the plastic Indian girl, and locked the cupboard door again. When he heard little movements, he unlocked the cupboard and opened the door a crack so she wouldn't be frightened in the dark. Then he got back into bed, covered himself up all except his eyes, and stayed perfectly still to watch what would happen. At first, nothing did. Then slowly, stealthily, the door was pushed open, and out crept a beautiful Indian girl. There was enough light in the room now for Omri to see the black of her hair, the chestnut brown of her skin, the bright red of her dress. He couldn't see her expression, but he guessed she was bewildered. She glanced all around and at once spotted Boone lying on the ground and Little Bear dozing beside him. She approached them both cautiously, and for a few moments she lingered behind Little Bear, clearly not sure whether she should wake him or not. She decided against it, and she circled Boone's feet. She sat herself cross-legged on his other side, facing Little Bear. She sat there, just staring at him. The three of them were so utterly still that they could have still been plastic. Then a black bird outside gave a very loud chirrup, and Little Bear sat up sharply. And when he woke up, he saw her. His whole body gave a jolt. Omri felt a prickling feeling on the back of his neck. The way they looked at each other, it was a long time. Then slowly, and both together, they rose to their feet. Little Bear spoke to her quietly in a strange language, and she answered. He smiled. Standing there on the other side of Boone, no touching or anything, they talked for many minutes in low voices. Then he put his hand into hers, and she put her hand into his, and they stood quietly holding hands. Little Bear pointed at Boone and began talking again. The girl crouched down, touched Boone gently and expertly, and looked up at Little Bear and nodded. Then Little Bear looked around the room and saw Omri. Omri put his finger to his lips and shook his head, as if to say, "Don't tell her about me." Little Bear nodded. He took the girl by the hand and led her to the seed box, up the ramp, and into the longhouse. After a moment or two, he came out again. He ran the length of the table till he stood on its edge, as near as Omri as he could get. "Do you like her?" Omri asked. Little Bear put his hands onto his belt and fastened it. I like. Fit wife for chief. I pay much for her. And he handed Omri his belt, made of shiny white beads. Now Omri hear Little Bear. Woman say, Boone good, not die. Little Bear pleased. Omri take Boone, put in Longhouse. Woman will take care and give medicine. Omri get food and make wedding feast, he said. How can you have a wedding feast with only 2 Indians? Yes, not good. Omri make more Indian, and then all Indian come to feast, he said hopefully. Omri shook his head no, and Little Bear's face fell. Little Bear, wouldn't you rather have your wedding feast at home with your own tribe? Little Bear was no fool. He understood at once. He stood still, staring at Omri. Omri put in box, send back. What do you think? Said Omri. Wouldn't it be better to be with your people? Very slowly the Indian nodded his head. And Boone? Boone too. Make him my brother first. Yes, then I'll send you all back. Oh, make him my brother first. Yes, said Omri, then I'll send you all back. When? When Boone's well enough to be there. Once Omri had decided, every day that passed was important because it was one day nearer to them going home. Patrick was as sad as he was, but he didn't argue against Omri's decision. He did understand it was best. It's the only way, really, said Patrick. And after that, they didn't talk about it anymore. He just tried to be at Omri's house as much as possible. He couldn't do things with Boone much, of course, because he was ill, and Boone was sitting up in the longhouse and demanding to talk to his horse, which they brought over to the entrance. Can't be expecting to get my strength back if you won't give me some of the hard stuff, he nagged, even pretending to have a relapse in his health. Omri pinched a nose dropper full of whiskey from his parents and squeezed a large drop down Boone's throat before the Indian girl, whose name was Bright Stars, of reference to her shining eyes, Omri supposed. Still, after he drank, Boone seemed so much better that Omri and Patrick decided it wouldn't do him any harm. He's used to it, after all, and thereafter Boone got a liquor ration 3 times a day, and he did okay with it. He'll be ready to go back tomorrow, said Omri on the 4th day. They'll probably look after him better than we can, in his own time. A thought struck him, and he fished out of his pocket the drawing Boone had made. Boone, is this your hometown? Sure is. Omri studied it closely under the magnifying glass. Away up the street, he saw a little sign reading Doctor. Is he a good doctor? About as good as any out west, I reckon. Fish a bullet out of a man's arm, cut his foot off if he got a snake bite. I seen him bring a pal of mine back from the dead. He'd be put a hot coal in his belly button, and he started screaming. He never operates on a man, though, till he's dead, passed out, and he don't charge anything for the liquor, neither. Omri and Patrick looked at each other. You'd feel that you were in good hands with this doctor after looking after you, Patrick said. Sure would. Anyway, I don't need any bones sawed off, and my wound's healing up fine. As long as I got a little whiskey, I'll be good as new. Boone bore not the slightest ill will toward Little Bear for having shot him. Well, that there's the Injun's natural nature. Poor simple critter, couldn't help himself. Keep him away from my horse, though. That night, before Omri had decided to send them back, he held the brotherhood ceremony. I wish we could ask our brothers, said Patrick to Omri at school. Suppose we tell them one day about all of this. They'll never believe us. Sending them back doesn't mean the magic will never work anymore. I'm going to put the key away somewhere safe, so I won't be tempted. But it will always be there. Patrick looked at him wonderingly. I never thought about that. So there'd be nothing to stop us, months or even years from now, from bringing Boone and Little Bear back to visit. I don't know. Maybe their time's different from ours, though, Omri said. It would be awful if they were old or, gosh, even dead. Omri shivered and changed the subject. As for our brothers coming, all I want of my brothers is to keep the rat in the cage. The rat had been caught by Omri after a long, patient wait with cheese and a fishing net. And Omri had threatened Gillen with the worst bait imaginable if he let it go yet again. The 2 boys went to Yap's after school and bought feast food for the ceremony, salted nuts, chips, and chocolate. Omri bought a 1/4 pound of the best meat at the butcher's for tiny hamburgers. A teaspoon probably would have been enough. But the butcher wasn't interested in selling only a teaspoonful of ground beef. They got bread, biscuits, cake, and soda from Omri's mother, and Omri sneaked another dropperful of the hard stuff for Boone. Omri was rather surprised Boone had agreed to be brother with a stinking redskin, but Boone actually seemed to think it was a cool idea. Ain't just anybody that gets to be brother with an Indian chief, you know, he said proudly as he rolled up his sleeve and Bright Star carefully swabbed his arm with soap and water. But when he saw Little Bear sharpening his knife, he said, "Heck, that's gonna hurt." "Oh, I'm only gonna nick ya, nothing at all." "Easy for you," said Boone. "I ain't so sure this is such a nice idea after all." But he cheered up when he saw the campfire being kindled and smelled the meat that Bright Star was cooking on a stick. And when Omri gave him a good swig of the dropper, he swaggered up to Little Bear and offered his arm with a drunken flourish. "Chop away, brother," he said. Little Bear went through a whole routine first, cleaning himself, offering up loud chanting prayers, and performing a marvelous stomping dance around the fire. Then he nicked his own wrist with the point of his knife, and the blood welled up. Boone took one look and burst into tears. "I don't want to. I changed my mind. I'm scared." And he cried and ran, but Little Bear seized his arm before Boone knew what was happening. The deed was done. Bright Stars bound their wrists together with a strip of hide torn from the hem of her red dress, and Boone looked at it. "Gee whiz, we done it. I'm part Injun now. I guess all I can say is nothing. Not one thing against him in the future." Then the two brothers sat on the ground, and Bright Star served them the cooked meat and the rest of the feast food. Patrick and Omri offered their congratulations to the new couple, and they started in on their own food. They kept their fire going with tiny bits of broken matchsticks and a bit of coal dust Omri had collected from the bunker outside. "I feel as if we're the same as them," murmured Patrick. "Me too," said Omri. "I wish we were all the same size, then there'd be no problems." "Don't be funny. No problems with 2 full-grown Indians and a 6-foot crying cowboy. I mean, if we were small, if we could enter their world and sleep in the long house and ride the horses." "I wouldn't mind eating one of those hamburgers, though," said Omri. Bright Star was now crouched by the fire, tending to it and singing softly. One of the horses whinnied, and Boone seemed to have dropped off to sleep, leaning on Little Bear's shoulder. Little Bear alone was aware of the boys watching them. He beckoned to Omri with his free hand. When Omri bent near him, he said, "Now, you mean you want to go back? Good time, all happy. Don't wait for morning." Omri looked at Patrick and nodded. "When you go into the cupboard," Omri said, "you must hold Bright Star, or she might not be able to go back with you. Woman go back with Little Bear, but Little Bear hold, not let go. And horse? Little Bear only Iroquois with horse." "Yes, but Boone must go separately. Don't drag him back to your time. Your people would probably kill him, even if you are his brother." Little Bear looked at Boone, asleep at his side and at their joined wrists. Then he took his knife and cut the string tying them together. Patrick gently lifted Boone up. "Don't forget his hat. He'd never forget us if we let him go back without that." To be safe, they sat Boone on his horse, and cowboys often ride in their sleep, and he didn't stir as Little Bear led him down the ramp across the table and up another ramp that Omri stood against the rim of the cupboard. Then Little Bear went back to the seed box. Carefully, he and Bright Star put up the fire with earth. Little Bear took a last look at his longhouse, then he put Bright Star onto the horse's back and led them after Boone. They stood all together in the bottom of the cupboard, and nobody spoke. Omri had his hand on the door when Patrick suddenly said, "I'm going to wake Boone up. I don't care. I've got to say goodbye to him." Hearing his name, Boone woke up by himself. So suddenly, he nearly fell off his horse and had to clutch the high pommel of his saddle. "What you want, kid?" he asked Patrick, whose face was close to him. "You're going home, Boone. I wanted to say goodbye." "I can't stand saying goodbye," he choked out and started to crumple and cry. "I just refuse to say it. I'll be busting out crying if I do," he said, and he blew a trumpet onto his handkerchief. Omri and Little Bear were staring at each other. Something else was needed, some special farewell. It was Little Bear who thought of it. "Omri, give me a hand." Omri put his hand forward, and the little horse braced his leg, but Little Bear held him steady. Little Bear took hold of Omri's little finger, drew his knife, and pricked it, and a drop of blood appeared. Little Bear solemnly pressed his own right wrist against the place that held it there. "Brother," he said, and he looked at Omri with fierce black eyes for the last time. "Brother." Omri withdrew his hand, and Little Bear jumped onto the back of the horse behind Bright Star, holding her around the waist so that she and the horse made one sort of unit that could not be separated during this unearthly journey. Little Bear raised his arm in salute, and Boone stood on his horse patiently while his horse let out a neigh. Here's a picture of them leaving. Two pages left, boys and girls. Now, cried Little Bear. Omri drew in his breath and closed the door and turned the key. He and Patrick stood frozen with sadness, the strangeness of it, the magic of it, then very slowly turned the key. Then he turned it back and opened the door. There they were, 2 plastic groups. Each boy lifted out his own and helplessly examined it. The life-giving details were blurry now. Plastic can't show the fine beadwork or the perfection of hair and muscle. The figures were there, but the people, the personalities, that was gone. We could just bring them back real quick, Patrick said huskily. No way, said Omri. Oh, I know, said Patrick. They're home by now. Omri put his group, the Indian, the girl, and the horse, on the shelf nearest his bed, where he could see it easily. He laid the beaded belt, still real, right beside it. Patrick slipped the mounted cowboy into his pocket, keeping his hand around it, almost as if he was trying to keep it warm. Then Omri took the key and left the room. His mother was in the kitchen, getting everyone a hot drink before bed. She took one look at Omri's face, and her hands became still. What's happened? What's wrong? Nothing, Mom. I want you to keep this key. I lost it, but luckily I found it again. You told me it was important, and I think it's important if you keep it for me, please. She nearly refused, but then she looked at him. You know what? I'll wear it. I'll wear this chain like I always meant to. You won't lose it, will you? She shook her head and suddenly reached for him and gave him a very nice hug. He was shaking. He broke away and ran back to his bedroom, near in tears. When Patrick was still standing with his hand in his pocket, gazing at the cupboard, Come on, I'm going to put all sorts of medicines in it, bottles of pills and stuff Mom's finished with. We'll pretend it's a doctor's cupboard, and then we can mix it all together. His voice petered out. These were silly games, such as they had played before. Nah, I don't want to put anything in the cupboard. I'd rather go for a walk. What should we do with the cupboard, said Omri. Let's just leave it empty in case. He didn't say in case what, but he didn't have to. Just to know you could, that felt like enough. Boys and girls, if you like the book, The Indian in the Cupboard, there's another one called The Return of the Indian, which is also a really great book. So, good luck on your AR test, and I hope you've enjoyed the book. Bye.